there, this is Kristen Corpos from NiftyKnowledgeRocks.com, and this video is about photography contracts and what you need to know for your photography business. I'm going to discuss the reasons why you should have a contract and what kind of stuff should be addressed in that contract. So, as an attorney that's also a photographer, I'm very sensitive to this topic. I think it's important that all people have rock solid contracts in place to protect their business. Now, of course, the best plan of action is to have an attorney draft your contract, but not everyone can afford that right away. I mean, as a new business, there are a ton of things you need to invest in. And since money doesn't grow on trees, which I wish it did, you have to prioritize sometimes, and that's hard. But getting a contract and getting advisement from an attorney, it should be at the top of your list. But I know that many of you guys are not going to do that, as I said. So because maybe you'd rather purchase a new 5D or a new lens to your collection, it's not going to be at the top of your list. So what can you do? You can consider purchasing a template contract. Now, investing in a template contract that's created by a reputable source, such as me and Nifty Knowledge Rocks, with both some standard boilerplate language and legal clauses, as well as provisions that are written exclusively for protecting photographers, it means that if you're doing that, you're taking steps necessary to protect your business. So even if you have a template contract, you're protecting your business. Now, being the attorney I am, I'm going to tell you again, even if you get one of these template contracts, you should consider seeking the advisement of an attorney. Now, that's one of the important things I want to point out before I proceed about this video about contracts. While I am an attorney, this video is for educational and self-help purposes only. And it's not meant to be legal advice. This video is not a substitute for an attorney or a law firm. All right, disclaimer out of the way. Why should you have a contract? Let's go through some of the reasons. Number one, a contract sets ground rules. In the agreement, you set forth what you, the photographer, are going to be doing and what you're going to be doing for the client. Now, you're going to find that many clients have never hired a photographer before, and they just aren't sure what to expect. So in this agreement, you're going to tell them what to expect. You're going to let your client know what you're going to be doing for them and how and when you're going to be doing it. So number two, the agreement also covers accountability and responsibility. What will your client be accountable or responsible for? And what will you, the photographer, be accountable or responsible for? So what happens if the client is late to the session? What happens if the client cancels? What happens if the photographer can't do the shoot or the session? When will the photographer have the photos ready for the client? And where will those photos be? How and when can a client purchase their images or purchase a photo product? Number three, contracts help educate clients on copyright. Many photographers get upset when they see their clients using their images in ways they shouldn't be. Now, but part of that issue is that often the client doesn't understand what they can or cannot do with their images. So the contract is one of the vehicles that can be used to not only protect the photographer's copyright, but also educate the client on what that means, and that the client is not allowed to alter or duplicate the images in any way or post them on social media sites without your permission or whatever you choose to place there in the contract. It depends on your business practices and what you want it to say. And number four, all contracts should contain provisions addressing both liability and remedies. In case that a dispute arises, it's important that photographers let clients know that they will not be held responsible if they miss a requested photo on a wedding day, for example. This is part of the agreement that the client is signing, especially when it comes to a wedding photography contract. This is important. By signing a contract with a provision like this, the client says they understand that you are only human and that you will do your best, but if you fail to capture a specific image, you're not going to be liable. Number five, having a contract is just plain professional. Now, personally, I wouldn't do business with a photographer without a contract. So do you think that your clients would want to do business with you if you don't have one? No, it's a scary thing. So, in today's world, not only does everyone want to be protected, but we also want to understand what we're getting from a transaction, especially when it comes to professional services. In a professional services transaction, it's a little bit different than, if you're going into a store and you're purchasing a pair of new shoes that you see and you buy. But it's not that easy to see when we're getting, what we're getting when we hire a professional photographer, for example, to provide us with a service. Number 6, you want to make sure you get paid. One of the big things outlined in a contract is both the retainer fee being paid to book the photographer or deposit, as well as the amount being paid for the agreed upon photography services or the package, or then the particular products that are being included in the package, and so on and so forth. You want to make sure you protect that and that you're going to get paid for those things. You need to let your clients know also what they're paying you for. So have a contract in place. Make sure you've got that together. All right, so more specifically, what goes into a contract? Those are just some of the general points, but what should you really think of putting into your contract? Now, I want to say again, my contract templates are for sale in the Nifty Knowledge Rocks shop, and those agreements are super, super detailed. Many points are addressed. So in this video, I'm just going to cover a few of the big things that go into a contract or that should go into your contract, just to give you an idea. But my templates that I provide, for example, for my wedding agreement, it's 5.5 pages long. And that's because I'm very detail oriented. And as a photographer myself, I want to make sure I'm protected. And a part of that is making sure that I have a solid contract in place that outlines everything that's important to that, taking the photos and the services and what comes after. All right, so here are the few must-haves for your contract. Number 1, one of the big things that goes into a contract are who are the parties involved. This includes the photographer's name as well as the client's names, along with addresses for both of you guys. Number 2, next big thing is specifics as to what is being agreed to in detail. What is the photographer providing to the client? How much coverage is included? Exactly what product is the client getting? What are the actual sizes of the items? If it's an album, describe the album in detail. What is the size? How many spreads or how many pages? What is the cover made of? Put that in your contract with your client. You want to put it all out there into this official document that's being reviewed and signed by both parties involved in the transaction. Number 3, cancellation and late policy. So what happens in the event of a cancellation? And what is the photographer's policy if the client is late to the session? That happens, right? So what if the client needs to reschedule the shoot? Is the retainer refundable? Those types of things. You want to address those specifically. Number 4, expectations. This is a big one. Set out what expectations, what it means, including provisions that are going to address items like, when will the photos be delivered to the client after the session? How will they be delivered? How long is the proofing gallery going to be open for? How long does the client have to place an order of photos or products? If the client is getting an album, what is involved in the album design process? How long does it take to design an album? How does it work? How does the whole thing work? How many album design changes are allowed? And what if you want extra album design changes? What's that going to cost for the client? Number 5, you want to be sure to include a provision addressing and educating your client about copyright, along with an explanation as to what constitutes an infringement. As I said, you need to educate your clients on what copyright means. You can't assume they know. What can they and can they not do with their images? Most clients just have no idea, so we need to educate them. And the contract should make it clear that the photographer retains the copyright to the images, presuming that's what you want, because you should want that. What uses are or are not allowed by the client, and what will the damages be if the client violates the photographer's copyright. If you're providing electronic copies of the images to the client, you're going to also want to provide or execute a print release with the client with more detailed information. Number 6, what happens if the photographer can't do the session, or for some reason there's an emergency, an explosion, a fire, earthquake, an act of God, and that session can't take place? What happens? There should be provisions in the contract that address what happens in these situations. And you need to have clauses addressing these things. With so many hurricanes and extreme weather stuff going on in recent years, these situations have become very, very real. And I definitely have some stories from photographers that have run into issues with these acts of God or natural things occurring and preventing things. Number 7, you want to make sure you add a clause to limit liability. I discussed this earlier as well, but this is a pretty standard thing in all contracts, right? Limit your liability. Number 8, it's also important to provide information in the contract regarding the dispute resolution. Now, what does that mean? If a dispute arises, what will happen? Will it go straight to the courts? Will it go to mediation or arbitration? What's going to be required to take place first? And what state laws are going to be used? Where will the court proceedings have to take place? And these are important issues to address in the contract, especially in situations where the client may live in a different state than the photographer. And that happens quite often, when it comes to weddings, for example, or when states where photographers, provide their services are very close together and they're working in several states. All right, number 9, signatures. You have to have the parties sign the contract. So that means you need to sign it, your client needs to sign it, and it needs to be signed by an adult. So remember that. Contracts can be signed electronically, and there are certain ways to do that. You can use a service like ShootQ or Pixify to create your contracts online and sign them online, and that's pretty cool. There's something called Sign Now, which you can use that has some great features at a nice monthly price. And you may have heard of the app Photography Contract Maker, which is like $2.99 in the App Store. So that's another option for you. If you do that, just make sure that you have a signed contract to show both parties have reviewed the contract and have agreed to it. That's what you need. You need the signatures, all right? So what would it cost you if you don't have a contract or you don't have a provision clause, let's say, that addresses your retainer fee and cancellations? Now, it could cost you a lot, and here's just a small example maybe you hadn't thought of. So what happens when a wedding booking gets canceled? And that happens. People cancel their weddings. Now, do you have a provision in your contract regarding retainer or deposit fees? Would you have to refund any retainer or deposit fee you've taken from the client if that client cancels their wedding? No, I hope not, because you should be super sure you've got a non-refundable retainer or deposit fee clause in your contract. If somebody cancels their wedding, you want to be sure that you keep that money they've given you, because after all, you've been holding this date open for their wedding. You've turned away possibly other clients, maybe even some other clients that were going to order a larger, more expensive package. You made a commitment to shoot their wedding, right? And so now that they canceled, why should you be totally left high and dry without any compensation for holding that date for them? And of course, it could happen. You could decide that you want to apply the retainer to another date if you're available. Let's say they reschedule, or they find somebody else to marry within the next 2 months. You may decide your own business practices will be different, but just make sure that you don't have to refund that retainer, because that's a bummer, right? Again, that's just a small example of something that could come up, but really there are a ton of things that can go wrong, and it's peace of mind to know that you have a solid contract in place with your client. And as I said earlier, you can purchase various types of contract templates at niftyknowledgerockshop.com. These templates they're for the modern photographer. They include the provisions necessary for photographers of today. They're not yesteryear and talking about antiquated things. This is for today. And they're easily customizable, and they have all the legal provisions that you should need, as well as exclusive photographer ones. And you should always have an attorney review your finalized contract. But for those of you just starting out, make sure you are using a reputable contract to protect yourself and your photography business, because you don't want to have these headaches, don't want this stuff to happen to you. Now, I hope this video was helpful for you and your business. More resources for photographers, including my podcasts, are available and can be found at niftyknowledgerocks.com. So check that out, and it's been a pleasure. Be nifty.